Captain Zara Velketh felt her secondary heart skip when the proximity alarms screamed across the bridge of the Serenity's edge. Her crystalline fingers danced across the holographic controls as she pulled her sleek reconnaissance vessel out of hyperspace, the star field snapping into focus around them. "Sensors are picking up something massive," her navigation officer reported, his voice tight with confusion. I've never seen readings like this." Zara's compound eyes focused on the main display as the image resolved. What appeared before them defied every convention of spacefaring civilization she knew. The vessel stretched nearly 3 kilometers in length, its hull a patchwork nightmare of mismatched metals, salvaged plating, and what appeared to be debris welded directly into its superstructure. Massive industrial arms jutted from its sides like the legs of some cosmic spider, each one bristling with makeshift weapons that had clearly been torn from a dozen different alien designs. "By the eternal void," whispered her communications officer, a young Kytherian whose bioluminescent patches were flickering in distress. "What species built something like that?" The ship looked like a floating graveyard. Hull sections bore the distinctive curves of Altarian pleasure craft, while other segments showed the angular precision of vegan military vessels. Thermal exhaust ports had been crudely cut into elegant Centaurian artships, their beautiful bioorganic curves now serving as mere components in this mechanical abomination. "Captain," the sensor officer's voice cracked, "I'm reading life signs. Thousands of them. They're all from different species." Zara's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just a ship built from salvage. This was a ship built from the remains of conquered vessels, and it was carrying the survivors as prisoners. Or worse. "Send an immediate priority transmission to the Galactic Council," she ordered, her voice steady despite the terror building in her chest. "We've encountered an unknown species, and based on their vessel configuration, they appear to be hostile raiders or slavers." The Serenity's Edge was a diplomatic vessel, armed only with standard defensive systems. Against whatever monster had built that floating nightmare, they would be helpless. But as the senior council representative in this sector, Zara had a duty to gather intelligence before fleeing. "Magnify Section 12, she commanded, pointing to what appeared to be the ship's bridge section. The image zoomed in, revealing a twisted spire of metal and glass that looked like it had been grown rather than built. Cables and conduits snaked across its surface like veins, pulsing with strange energies. Windows of different shapes and sizes were scattered across its surface, suggesting that whoever built this ship had simply cut holes wherever they needed them, with no regard for structural integrity or aesthetic design. "Captain," her communications officer's voice was barely a whisper, "they're hailing us." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Zara had handled first contact situations before, but always with species that showed at least basic civilized behavior in their technology. This ship represented something else entirely. "Put it through," she said finally. The main screen flickered, and a face appeared that made several of her crew members step backward in shock. The being was clearly bipedal, with pale skin marked by what appeared to be ritual scars or battle wounds. Its hair was long and unkempt, and its eyes held an intensity that suggested either madness or desperate intelligence. Most unsettling of all, it was smiling. "Greetings," the creature said in perfect galactic standard, though its accent was unlike anything in the linguistic databases. "I am Commander Sarah Chun of the Terran vessel Prometheus Unbound. We've been traveling for quite some time, and we're hoping you might be able to provide us with some information about local space." Zara found her voice, though it took considerable effort. "This is Captain Velketh of the Galactic Council vessel Serenity's Edge. Your ship appears to contain components from multiple known species. Can you explain how you acquired these materials?" The human's smile faltered slightly. Yes, I suppose it does look rather intimidating from the outside. The thing is, Captain, we've been traveling for over 200 years, and we've had to make do with whatever we could find along the way. When your ship is your entire world, you tend to use everything available to keep it running." 200 years. Zara's mind reeled at the implications. No species she knew of attempted interstellar journeys that long without established supply lines or diplomatic relations. Are those life signs we're detecting on your vessel representatives of various species you've encountered? She asked carefully. Representatives? Commander Chen looked confused for a moment, then her expression cleared. Oh, you mean the colonists? Yes, we've picked up quite a few refugees over the years. People fleeing war zones, failed colonies, that sort of thing. The Prometheus isn't much to look at, but she's got room for anyone who needs passage. Something in the human's tone suggested there was far more to this story than simple refugee assistance, but before Zara could probe further, her tactical officer's voice cut through the conversation with barely controlled panic. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout their vessel. Whatever they're powering up, it's unlike anything in our databases. Commander Chen's image flickered as she apparently consulted something off-screen. When she looked back, her expression had changed to one of urgent concern. Captain Velketh, I'm afraid we're about to have a much bigger problem than first contact protocols. The space around them erupted into chaos, as reality itself seemed to tear open. Massive, writhing forms began emerging from what appeared to be dimensional rifts, their surfaces gleaming with an oily, unnatural sheen that hurt to look at directly. Each creature was the size of a small moon, their bodies covered in what looked like technological components that pulsed with malevolent energy. Devourers. Commander Chen's voice cut through the Serenity's Edge's bridge alarms with grim familiarity. We've been tracking this swarm for 3 months. They consume entire star systems, breaking down matter at the quantum level to fuel their reproduction. Zara watched in horror as one of the creatures extended a massive appendage toward a nearby asteroid field. Where it touched, the rocks simply ceased to exist, their matter converted into raw energy that flowed back into the creature's body, like liquid light. How many ships do you have in the area? Chun asked urgently. We need to coordinate evacuation procedures immediately. This is a single reconnaissance vessel, Zara replied, her voice tight, with growing panic. The nearest Council fleet is 6 days away at maximum speed. On screen, Commander Chen's face hardened. Then we do this the hard way. Prometheus, battle stations. Activate all defensive grids and prep the main cannon. The monstrous human ship began to transform before their eyes. What had looked like random chunks of salvaged metal suddenly revealed their true purpose as armor plating slid aside to expose weapon systems that defied classification. The industrial arms they had mistaken for crude construction tools rotated and locked into position, each one revealing itself to be a massive siege weapon built from the combined technologies of a dozen civilizations. Captain Velketh. Chen's voice carried absolute authority now. I need you to fall back to minimum safe distance and begin broadcasting evacuation warnings to any inhabited systems within 50 light-years. These things move fast once they start feeding. What about your ship? Zara asked, even as she began issuing retreat orders to her crew. The Prometheus Unbound has faced devourers before, Chen replied grimly. We know their weaknesses. As the Serenity's Edge pulled back, Zara watched the human vessel accelerate directly toward the emerging swarm. What she had initially taken for chaotic, amateur construction now revealed itself as something far more sophisticated. The ship's hull wasn't just armored, it was adaptive. Sections reconfigured themselves in real time as different weapon systems came online, the vessel reshaping itself to meet the tactical requirements of the moment. The first devourer to fully manifest turned its attention to the approaching Prometheus, extending multiple feeding appendages in what was clearly an attack posture. The human ship's response was immediate and devastating. A lance of pure energy erupted from its main cannon, a weapon that appeared to have been built from the combined power cores of at least 6 different alien vessels. The beam struck the creature's center mass, and for a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the devourer simply unraveled. Its quantum structure collapsed in on itself, the creature's vast bulk dissolving into component particles that scattered across space like glittering dust. The effect was so complete that even the dimensional rift it had emerged from flickered and began to close. Impossible, breathed Zara's tactical officer. Nothing can destabilize a devourer's quantum matrix. The Council's best scientists have been trying to develop such a weapon for decades. Commander Chen's voice crackled over the communication channel, strain evident in her tone. The trick isn't destroying them. It's understanding what they are. Devourers aren't really creatures at all. They're quantum parasites that have learned to mimic living tissue. Hit them with the right frequency resonance, and their entire structure collapses. 3 more Devourers emerged from rifts that opened along the Prometheus's flanks, clearly adapting their tactics to avoid the main cannon's firing arc. The human ship's response was immediate and shocking in its brutality. The salvaged hull sections Zara had dismissed as crude armor suddenly revealed themselves to be something far more sinister. Each piece of alien technology had been reverse-engineered and repurposed, creating weapons that used the Devourer's own quantum manipulation abilities against them. A section of Altarian pleasure craft hull opened like a flower, revealing a gravity well generator that began tearing chunks of matter from the nearest Devourer and feeding them into what appeared to be a miniaturized black hole. Vegan military components activated in sequence, creating a lattice of energy fields that trapped another creature in a cage of its own twisted spacetime. But it was the biological sections that proved most horrifying. The elegant Centaurian Artship components weren't just salvage, they were still alive, their bioorganic systems having been integrated into the Prometheus's neural network. Living ship minds that had once created beauty among the stars were now weapons of war, their consciousness twisted into tools of destruction that understood alien biology well enough to disrupt it at the cellular level. How did you learn to fight them? Zara asked, unable to look away from the slaughter unfolding before her. Chen's reply was quiet, almost lost in the background noise of battle. We didn't have a choice. When you're alone in the dark between the stars, carrying the last survivors of a dozen failed worlds, you learn to use every advantage you can find, even if it means becoming something monstrous yourself. The last Devourer fell to a weapon that appeared to be built from the combined sensor arrays of multiple Council vessels, creating a resonance cascade that literally rewrote the creature's quantum signature. As the dimensional rifts collapsed and space returned to normal, the Prometheus Unbound slowly powered down its weapons and resumed its original configuration. But now Zara understood what she was truly looking at. This wasn't a ship built by monsters. This was a ship built by survivors who had been forced to become monsters in order to protect something precious. The question was, what had driven humanity to such desperate measures? The docking bay of the Prometheus Unbound was unlike anything Zara had ever seen. As her shuttle touched down on the landing platform, she found herself surrounded by a massive space that defied the ship's external geometry. Impossible curves and angles stretched in directions that shouldn't exist, while gravity seemed to flow in streams rather than maintaining a consistent downward pull. Folded space technology, explained Dr. Marcus Webb, the human scientist who had met her at the airlock. His appearance was as unsettling as a ship, tall and gaunt, with cybernetic implants visible along his skull and arms. We had to get creative with interior space once we started taking on refugees. The Prometheus is currently housing nearly 500,000 beings from 237 different species. As they walked through corridors that bent and twisted like living arteries, Zara began to see the ship's inhabitants. What she discovered challenged every assumption she had made about the vessel and its crew. The refugees weren't prisoners or slaves. They were citizens of a mobile nation that had been traveling through space for generations. Children of a dozen different species played together in gravity-neutral playgrounds, their laughter echoing through halls lined with living walls that pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns. Markets had been established in expanded cargo bays, where beings traded goods and services using a complex barter system that had evolved organically over decades of shared survival. The early years were difficult, Dr. Webb continued as they passed through what appeared to be a massive hydroponic garden where Centaurian plant shapers worked alongside human engineers to optimize food production. When Earth was destroyed, the Prometheus was still in its prototype phase. We launched with barely enough supplies for the original crew of 800 humans. Destroyed. Zara stopped walking, her crystalline skin flickering with shock. Your homeworld was destroyed. Webb nodded grimly. Solar collector malfunction. The entire inner system was sterilized by radiation. We were humanity's first attempt at interstellar colonization, launched just 6 months before the disaster. As far as we know, we're all that's left of our species." They entered an observation deck where beings of various species stood looking out at the stars. The walls here were transparent, revealing the vastness of space beyond, but also showing the true extent of the ship's modifications. What had appeared from the outside to be crude armor plating was actually a complex network of habitat modules, each one a self-contained world designed to meet the specific environmental needs of different refugee populations. "How do you maintain order among so many different species?" Zara asked, watching a group of crystalline beings similar to her own people teaching human children the mathematical principles that govern their biocrystalline growth. "We don't," said a new voice behind them. Zara turned to see Commander Chen approaching, but she looked different here in her own ship. The wild intensity was still present in her eyes, but it was tempered by something else, profound sadness mixed with unshakable determination. Order isn't something you impose on a community this diverse. It's something that emerges from necessity and mutual respect. Chen gestured toward a viewing portal where several beings were working together to repair what appeared to be a section of hull plating. When the Vegan Empire fell to civil war, we rescued over 30,000 refugees from the burning fleet yards. The survivors included engineers, artists, philosophers, farmers. They brought their knowledge, their culture, their hope. In return, we gave them a home. "But the weapons," Zara said quietly, "the way you repurposed their technology, was done with their consent and participation," Chen replied firmly. "Every weapon system on this ship was designed and built by survivors who understood what we would face in the dark between stars. The Altarian gravity wells, designed by former pleasure craft pilots who lost everything to Devourer attacks. The Centaurian bioweapons, created by artists who chose to transform their gift for beauty into a tool for protection." They moved to another section of the ship, where Zara was surprised to find what appeared to be a vast library and cultural center. Beings of every description sat at study terminals, learning languages, sharing stories, creating art that blended traditions from across the galaxy. At the center of it all stood a massive holographic display showing not star charts or tactical data, but family trees. "The archive of memory," Dr. Webb explained. "Every refugee who comes aboard shares their history, their culture, their knowledge. We preserve it all, ensuring that even if their homeworlds are gone, their heritage survives." Zara studied the display, seeing connections spanning dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. Names, faces, stories, achievements, failures, dreams. It was a living memorial to civilizations that existed now only in the minds of the survivors. "This is why you fight the Devourers," she said, understanding finally dawning. "Not just to survive, but to protect this." "Exactly," Chen replied. "We've become something that shouldn't exist according to galactic norms. A mobile civilization without territory, without formal government, without the backing of any established power. We're nomads, refugees, survivors, but we're also something new, something that can adapt, improvise, overcome challenges that would destroy traditional societies." As if to emphasize her point, alarms began sounding throughout the ship, not the harsh battle klaxons Zara had heard earlier, but softer chimes that somehow conveyed urgency without panic. "Distress call," Dr. Webb said, checking a handheld device. "Long-range sensors are picking up Devourer activity in the Kepler tertiary system. Estimated population, 4 billion beings across 6 inhabited worlds." Commander Chen's expression hardened. "Time to intercept. 18 hours at maximum acceleration." "Then we go," Chen said simply. She turned to Zara. "Captain Velketh, I understand this is a lot to process. Your people, the Galactic Council, they see us as monsters because of what we've had to become. But I need you to understand something. We didn't choose this path because we wanted to be warriors. We chose it because someone has to stand between the darkness and the innocent." Through the transparent walls, Zara could see the ship beginning to reconfigure itself for faster-than-light travel. Hull sections shifted and merged. Engines that had been hidden in the superstructure began to glow with gathering energy, and the entire vessel started to reshape itself into something sleeker, more predatory. The question is, Chin continued, will the Council help us save those 4 billion lives, or will they waste time debating whether we have the right to exist? The Kepler tertiary system was already half consumed when the Prometheus Unbound dropped out of hyperspace. 3 of the 6 inhabited worlds had been reduced to empty space, their matter converted into the swirling energy patterns that fed the growing devourer swarm. The remaining planets showed signs of massive evacuation efforts. Streams of refugee ships fleeing toward the system's edge, while overwhelmed defense fleets fought desperate holding actions. Zara stood on the bridge of the human vessel, her diplomatic credentials having earned her observer status for what everyone knew might be the last stand of an entire civilization. Around her, the bridge crew worked with grim efficiency, their actions coordinated by the ship's artificial intelligence system that seemed to incorporate elements from dozens of different alien computational methods. Devourer count is 300 and climbing, reported the tactical officer, a young Altarian whose biomechanical interface allowed her to process combat data at superhuman speeds. They're focusing their feeding on the population centers. At current consumption rates, the remaining worlds have less than 6 hours. Council fleet status? Commander Chen asked, her eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the deteriorating situation. Still 4 hours out, Zara replied, frustration evident in her voice. The emergency session is debating whether to engage without formal authorization from the member worlds. Chen's laugh was bitter. 4 billion lives hang in the balance, and they're worried about paperwork. On the main screen, the defense fleet of Kepler Tertiary made their final push against the Devourer swarm. Their ships were sleek and modern, representing the best military technology the local civilization could produce. Against the quantum parasites, they might as well have been throwing pebbles at a hurricane. Weapon after weapon struck the creatures with no effect, while the Devourers methodically consumed both the defending vessels and the energy from their attacks. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a direct plea from the Kepler Defense Command. They're requesting immediate assistance." Chen studied the tactical display for a long moment, calculating odds that everyone knew were impossible. The Prometheus was a single ship facing a swarm that had already consumed 3 worlds. Even with their exotic weapons and adaptive technology, victory seemed unlikely. "All hands, this is the commander," Chen announced over the ship-wide communication system. "We have a situation requiring full commitment of our resources. I won't lie to you, the odds are not in our favor, but there are 4 billion innocent beings in this system who will die if we don't act. I'm asking for volunteers only. Anyone who wants to evacuate to minimum safe distance is free to do so with no judgment." Zara watched in amazement as response indicators lit up across the bridge displays. Not a single being aboard the massive vessel had chosen to evacuate. Every refugee, every survivor, every person who had found sanctuary aboard the Prometheus Unbound was volunteering to risk their life for strangers they had never met. "All right then," Chen said quietly. "Let's show these parasites what happens when you threaten our neighbors. All weapons free. Maximum acceleration. We're going in." The transformation that followed was unlike anything Zara had witnessed before. The Prometheus didn't just reconfigure its hull. It seemed to evolve in real time, its shape flowing like liquid metal as different weapon systems integrated and merged. The ship became something alive, predatory, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. But what made Zara's breath catch was the realization that the ship wasn't acting alone. All around them, smaller vessels began emerging from hidden bays and dock ports built into the Prometheus's superstructure. Not escape pods or shuttles, but fully armed combat craft piloted by refugees who had chosen to fight rather than flee. "The volunteer fleet," Dr. Webb explained, appearing beside her. "Every refugee community aboard the ship maintains their own defense force. They know that sometimes the best way to protect what you love is to meet your enemies head-on." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Traditional military doctrine called for long-range engagements, careful positioning, overwhelming firepower concentrated on single targets. The humans and their allies fought with desperate creativity, using tactics that seemed to violate every rule of space combat. Small craft dove directly into devourer-feeding appendages, their crews detonating resonance bombs at point-blank range to disrupt the creature's quantum coherence. The Prometheus itself moved through the swarm like a living thing, its adaptive hull allowing it to phase shift through devourer attacks, while simultaneously channeling the creature's own energy into its weapon systems. Most remarkably, the refugee pilots seemed to anticipate each other's actions with impossible precision. Zara realized they were using a combination of telepathic coordination from psychic species and quantum entanglement communication from species that manipulated reality at the subatomic level. The result was a fleet that fought as a single organism, each ship perfectly positioned to support others in ways that maximized their combined effectiveness. How is this possible? Zara asked, watching a squadron of modified vegan fighters use their knowledge of quantum mechanics to create localized reality distortions that trap devourers in temporal loops. Necessity, Jin replied, her hands dancing over controls that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. When you're fighting for the survival of everything you care about, you discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. The tide began to turn as the Prometheus reached the heart of the swarm. The ship's main weapon, now revealed to be a massive quantum resonance cannon built from the combined technologies of every species aboard, fired continuously into the largest concentration of devourers. Each shot didn't just destroy individual creatures. It created cascade failures that spread through the swarm's quantum entanglement network. But the victory came at a cost. As the last devourers fell and the dimensional rifts finally closed, the Prometheus Unbound hung motionless in space, its hull scarred and broken, many of its weapon systems dark and silent. Casualties? Chen asked quietly. 73 volunteer pilots confirmed lost, the tactical officer reported, her voice heavy with grief. Hull breaches in sections 12 through 18. Main drive offline. Quantum resonance cannon is completely burned out. Chen nodded slowly, then activated the ship-wide communication system again. This is the commander. The system is secure. All devourers have been eliminated. I want damage control teams to focus on life support systems first, then structural integrity. We'll worry about weapons and drives later. She looked at Zara with eyes that held the weight of command and the cost of victory. Captain, I hope your council fleet arrives soon. We're going to need help with the evacuation efforts, and the Prometheus won't be combat ready for some time. Outside the viewports, the refugee ships from the 3 surviving worlds continued their exodus toward safety, their passage protected by a ship and crew that had sacrificed everything to ensure their survival. The Galactic Council's emergency session had been in progress for 6 hours when Captain Velketh's testimony reached its conclusion. The vast amphitheater was filled with representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy, their diverse forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that typically represented the unity of their alliance. Today, that unity was fractured. Let me understand this correctly, said Councillor Vexthrain, his biomechanical form towering over the speaker's podium. This human vessel, which appears to be constructed entirely from salvaged alien technology, single-handedly destroyed a devourer swarm that had already consumed 3 worlds and was threatening to sterilize an entire system. That is correct, Zara replied, her crystalline form flickering with the stress of the interrogation. The Prometheus Unbound eliminated over 300 quantum parasites using weapons and tactics that our military scientists deemed impossible. Murmurs rippled through the assembled representatives. The devourer threat had plagued the galaxy for decades, and the Council's best efforts had resulted in nothing more than evacuation protocols and defensive strategies that rarely worked. The idea that a single ship crewed by refugees could succeed where entire fleets had failed challenged everything they believed about military capability and technological superiority. And you're certain these humans obtained this technology through legitimate means? Asked Councillor Mariath, her aquatic form undulating with suspicion within her environmental suit. I witnessed their refugee intake procedures personally, Zara responded firmly. Every piece of alien technology aboard their vessel was incorporated with the full consent and participation of survivors from the respective species. They're not raiders or conquerors. They're preservers of civilizations that would otherwise be lost. The debate that followed was fierce and divisive. Representatives from worlds that had suffered devourer attacks spoke in favor of immediate alliance with the humans, arguing that results mattered more than conventional diplomatic protocols. Others, particularly those from species whose technology had been incorporated into the Prometheus, expressed outrage at what they saw as desecration of their cultural heritage. The real question, interjected Counselor Zekprime, is hive mind consciousness speaking through multiple synthetic bodies simultaneously, is whether we're dealing with saviors or with a new form of threat. This human ship represents something outside our understanding of proper civilization. Should we be grateful for their assistance or concerned about their methods? Admiral Kafvarin, the Council's senior military commander, stood to address the assembly. His veteran status and battle scars commanded immediate attention. I've reviewed Captain Velketh's tactical reports. The humans didn't just defeat the Devourers. They did so using strategies that suggest intimate knowledge of quantum parasite biology and behavior. The question we need to answer is, how did they acquire this knowledge? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the human ambassador who had arrived aboard the Council fleet, stepped forward to address the assembly. Her appearance was as unsettling as that of her fellow humans, pale, scarred, with cybernetic implants that glowed softly in the chamber's lighting. "We learned to fight the Devourers because we had no choice," she said, her voice carrying across the vast amphitheater without technological amplification. 60 years ago, our ship encountered its first swarm while responding to a distress call from a Centaurian colony. We lost 40,000 people in that engagement, including most of our military personnel. We survived only because the dying Centaurian bioships shared their neural patterns with our AI systems, teaching us their final thoughts about the creatures that were killing them. The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Every weapon system aboard the Prometheus Unbound was designed by beings who had lost everything to the Devourers. Dr. Harper continued. The Altarian gravity wells were created by pilots whose families were consumed before their eyes. The vegan quantum disruptors were built by engineers whose homeworld was sterilized. The Centaurian bioweapons were designed by artists who chose to transform their gift for beauty into instruments of protection. We didn't steal their technology. We inherited their pain and their determination to ensure others wouldn't suffer the same fate. Counselor Yethmiran, representing one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, spoke into the silence that followed. Yet you've created something that exists outside all established norms of interstellar society. Your ship is a mobile nation without territory, government, or formal structure. How do we integrate such an entity into galactic civilization? You don't, Dr. Harper replied simply. We exist in the spaces between your worlds, in the dark regions where your influence doesn't reach. We're not asking for membership in the Galactic Council or recognition as a sovereign power. We're offering something simpler, partnership in protecting the innocent. Admiral Kafvarin leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing? The Devourer threat is expanding, Harper said, activating a holographic display that showed swarm activity across multiple sectors. Your intelligence indicates at least 12 major incursions in the past year, with the frequency increasing. Traditional military responses have proven inadequate. The Prometheus offers an alternative, rapid response capability backed by weapons specifically designed to counter quantum parasites. In exchange for what? Demanded Counselor Vextrain. Safe passage through Council space, access to repair facilities when needed, and coordination with your evacuation efforts, Harper replied. We're not asking for resources or territory. We're asking for the right to continue doing what we've always done, protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The debate that followed lasted another 4 hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The galaxy faced a growing threat that conventional forces couldn't handle, and the humans had proven their capability. When the vote was finally called, the measure passed by a narrow margin. Captain Velketh found herself appointed as the official council liaison to the Prometheus Unbound, a position that required her to spend several months aboard the massive vessel as it resumed its patrol of the galactic rim. What she discovered during that time changed her understanding not just of humanity, but of what civilization could become when stripped of everything except the determination to survive and protect others. The Prometheus wasn't just a ship. It was a living symbol of hope for the displaced and desperate throughout the galaxy. Word of their victory at Kepler Tertiary spread through refugee networks and underground communication channels, reaching beings who had thought themselves abandoned by civilized space. They came in small groups at first, then in growing numbers, each carrying stories of loss and the fragile hope of finding sanctuary among the stars. The ship continued to evolve, its hull expanding to accommodate new populations, its weapon systems growing more sophisticated as each refugee community contributed their knowledge and expertise. What had begun as humanity's desperate attempt to preserve their species had become something larger, a mobile civilization dedicated to the protection of all life in the galaxy. Years later, when historians attempted to classify the Prometheus Unbound and its impact on galactic civilization, they found themselves unable to apply traditional categories. It wasn't a military vessel, though it possessed devastating weapons. It wasn't a colony ship, though it housed nearly 1 million beings. It wasn't a research vessel, though it preserved the knowledge of hundreds of extinct civilizations. In the end, they simply called it what its inhabitants had always known it to be: home for those who had nowhere else to go, and hope for those who faced the darkness between the stars.